record.
And it should be recording now. And I'll just mention too that you're welcome to answer any question, or you're welcome to ask any questions during the session. But if you do have some questions that maybe there's something sensitive information wise, since we are recording it, be mindful and we'll have some time at the end where we'll stop the recording and you can potentially ask that question then or contact us after.
Thanks, Matt. So we are going to cover the types of ballots that libraries can go out for or referendums, choosing an amount and the risks associated with that, and some advocacy basics. So for ballot basics, why libraries go out for referendums, the different types of ballots, the processes for each, and the timelines associated with those. And I'm also going to talk about the tax cap. Hopefully all of you have heard of the tax cap. If you haven't, that's okay. We're going to talk about that today. So first, why do libraries pursue ballot funding? So first and probably most importantly, it gives the community or your patrons a direct say in supporting the library. It gives your patrons, your community members, the option to tax themselves, right? You're not, or the staff, your board, you're not directly imposing a library tax. The vote is for the people to tax themselves. They are taxing themselves, right? So that's a pretty important point. And then secondly, it's sustainable or permanent funding. It's not volatile funding like the money that you get from your local municipality or county or village or wherever that funding comes from. Additionally, it may provide a tax base that's more representative of your user base. It provides more autonomy for your library, and it may simplify your funding streams, meaning it may pool all of your local funding sources into one. If you do it correctly, you're going to be combining all your local funding into one pot of money. So there's a couple of options for going out on the ballot. One we refer to Ed Law 259, and that's just a basic referendum item. And the first one is a school ballot. And that is when the library places a funding proposition on your local school district ballot. And that happens in May, more specifically the third Tuesday in May. The second referendum option is your local municipal ballot. And that's when the library places a funding proposition either on your village or your town or even your local county. That is a little more rare. We don't normally see that, but usually your town is what is more popular that we see in our system. So that also can be done. A district public library is when the school or when the library goes and forms it, I'm sorry, is when you go out on the ballot or when you, I am sorry, I cannot speak. I can't form a sentence this morning. When it's within your local school district boundary. And then a special legislative district is when you can combine special districts or special boundaries. And that can be kind of a custom. It can be a town or even a village and a school. So you're combining different localities or municipalities. So it's more of a custom. And that is very rare. That really hasn't been done since 2011. And we'll talk about that more when we within the next couple slides when we talk about districts. So for the school ballot referendum, that does not require rechartering. The library maintains the status as a municipal or an association library. So you're not changing the legal status of your library. It's a simple process. It's a short timeline. It can prevent or cause double dipping. It provides stable funding. We talked about that in a couple previous slides. And the trustees are not elected, which could lead to a claim of taxation without representation. So the steps for placing a ballot referendum, it starts with your library board passing a resolution, or, first coming up with an amount that the library wants to go out for and voting on that, and then passing a resolution. And this is if the library, they have to override the tax cap if they're already on the ballot. So if the library is already on the ballot and they're going out for an increase, you have to override that tax cap. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in the presentation when I talk about the tax cap. And then step 2, and this is important, and this has kind of come up within the last couple years. The library director could be a trustee also, but more than likely it's going to be the director. Really needs to get in touch with the school, the district office, the business manager of the school, and get that deadline for the public notice. By law, the school district needs to present a public notice. They have to publish 45 days before the vote. And your referendum item has to be included in that public notice. So they need to give you a deadline of when they need that referendum item or the wording of that referendum from the library. So it's really important that you get in touch with the school. Usually it's February, beginning of March. So it's really important to know when that deadline is, because they have to have a printed notification that goes out to the public. And a lot of times they don't print those in-house. They're working with a third party. So they're putting their stuff out in advance. So it's just really important to get that deadline. It's also important to meet with the school superintendent just to let them know what the library is planning to do. A lot of times the superintendent isn't aware that the library can do this or is legally allowed to do this. So it's usually an educational piece for the library board and the staff or the director to go in and have a meeting with the school superintendent. And it's just a nice time to inform them of, what's going on with the library, why the library needs this additional funding, that sort of thing. So it's really important to get in touch with the superintendent, have a meeting with them. What we have seen in our system is turnover in this position. A lot of turnover in school administration has happened within the last several years. So this is just a great opportunity for the director and the board president to just have an opportunity to meet with the superintendent or, leaders or school administration in general, just to have a nice conversation about the library. So we really encourage to have that meeting with the school superintendent. So meet with your school superintendent. Then a petition and a letter is then presented to the school board asking to be placed in that public notice and to be put on the school ballot. And then an educational campaign is conducted within the community. And your referendum appears as a separate item on the school ballot. It's not included within the budget. It is completely separate. And that is a really important piece to include in your educational campaign. A lot of people think that the library budget or that referendum, that increase that you're going out for is part of the overall school budget, and it is not. So that is something that really needs to be made clear. And then the vote passes, it's successful. And once the vote happens, the school district collects the tax on behalf of the library. It's collected when they collect their school district tax, and they then turn it over to the library. They keep it separate and then they turn it over to the library, usually in the form of a check. And how they do that, it's printed out on the school district tax bill as a separate line item. Any questions with the process or the steps? I know there's a lot of information there. All right. So going out on the municipal ballot it's a similar process, similar concept. It also does not require rechartering. The library also maintains its legal status as a municipal or association library. Simple process, just like the school ballot referendum. It's a short timeline. It can also prevent or cause double dipping. It provides stable funding for the library. And just like the school ballot, the trustees are not elected, but it also can lead to claims of taxation without representation. So steps are a little bit similar. There's a couple additional ones. So instead of obtaining a deadline from the school district, you're going to be obtaining the deadline from the Board of Elections. So there's an additional agency involved in this process. So the first thing that the library needs to do is get a hold of the local county Board of Elections and get the deadline from them. The board also has to pass a resolution and again, set up those meetings with the additional stakeholders, the town or the village, whichever municipality you're going to be going on the ballot for, and explain the process. Again, you know, it's probably going to be an educational meeting, but the purpose of those meetings is to, you don't need their permission, but you want to get their support, along with the meetings with the superintendent and even, you know, the school board. Again, you don't need their permission. The law allows you to do these things. You want their support, because the last thing that you want is a negative campaign from the local municipality or the local school board or the superintendent. So we always advise you want their buy-in, you want their support. And it's important to kind of, and Matt's going to talk about this a little bit when he talks about the risk assessment and, you know, the advocacy piece of this presentation, understanding, you know, a little bit about, you know, the politics involved. There's some dynamics that are going on within these groups, these stakeholders, before going into these meetings is key, just to know how those conversations might go. So that's important. For this petition, you are going to need 10% of the number of the votes cast in the last election that was held in the previous year there. And then you're going to have to present that petition to the municipal board. Like the school ballot, the library really needs to conduct an educational campaign. This campaign might need to be a little more rigorous, because you're going to, your user base is going to be more, you know, focused more on a different user base. So, so that's really important. And then your vote is actually going to be during the general election in November, not in May. So, and then when the vote is successful, the municipality will then collect the tax and then turn it over. Any question about the steps for the municipal referendum?
Do we have to have 10% if we go on for the school board referendum?
No. In the petition with the school ballot, so this is a little tricky, is actually not legally required. We strongly recommend it, because what we have seen is that some school districts actually require it as a local procedure. And we've seen that in one case. We've had a local school actually require a library have a petition with 25 signatures with school district residents on it. So we tell libraries, have a petition. We actually draft up the petition with the form and everything, and we send it to the library so they don't have to do it. Some libraries do it on their own because they're so used to it, especially libraries that go out every year. But we tell libraries to do it because we don't know if the school's going to require it. And honestly, I don't know if that's even illegal, if that can even be challenged, because I don't know if a local school district procedure can trump ed law. But but it's good to have it because it shows you have the voter support for going on the petition by having those signatures. So it's good to have that. We draft that petition for you. So your board can sign the petition if they're district residents. So and you can, have that petition right at your circ desk, have patrons sign it. So we recommend 25, get more if you can. But yeah. Any other questions? Okay. So district public library. Let's see if I can get this straight, because when I first started speaking about it, my brain just froze. So a district public library now is when a library actually can form a district to serve this, like an actual district boundary. Now, if you've heard of like a fire district, you're creating an actual legal district. So this is very different than actually going out on the ballot. So why create a public library district? So improved services, predictable funding, increased autonomy, simplified funding stream, equity and fairness and tax support, enhanced ownership by the community, changed boundaries to reflect service area. So the last one is really what sets this apart from the first two options that we talked about. This is where you're actually going to change your service area and change your legal structure of your library. And you're actually going to be you're created by your voter base. So you're going to be created by, and we're going to talk specifically today about school districts, school district public library. So this option, created by school district voters, the boundaries are the same as the school. The library operates independently, so you're not legally tied or connected to the school. You're a complete separate autonomous organization, separate from the school. But the school still collects the tax for you. You're not sending out a tax bill. The school is still collecting that tax. It's still going to be on the school tax bill. They're collecting it for you. So the steps for doing this, this is a lot more, there's a lot more steps involved in this. So the library really wants to take a lot more time considering this. So you're really going to want to think about your long range plan and really get community input and feedback. So we really recommend surveying your community and going back to your long range plan, which really shouldn't be a big deal if you have a somewhat current long range plan. If you're up to date with your long range plan, it shouldn't be a big deal. But it might be because, things change every couple of years in the library world. So, but that's really the first step into consider changing to a school district public library. The next thing the library really needs to do is reach out to DLD, which is the Division of Library Development at the State Library. to discuss any potential service area issues. There might be some overlap. And they're going to tell you that. They're going to say, well, you really can't do this, you can't do that. And we would be part of that conversation, and we would actually be reaching out on the library's behalf. Here at the system, we would do that for you. And after doing all of that, then your library board would then decide to move forward. Then you would have those meetings with the school board, and then you would also bring in the municipal board, because you would want them to know the last thing the library really wants to happen is people on that municipal board, both town, both county, and both village, or all three boards, hearing what the library is doing and not knowing. You know, you don't want these people being the last to know what the library's plans are, especially when it comes to their budgets and funding, especially if they fund you. So bringing everybody that's involved in the library in on these conversations right at the beginning is really important. And those groups really should vote to support what the library plans to do. And then there should be a petition created and filed with the school district. And there's some details with that, the 25 signatures, and there's the ed law reference to that. And then trustees also need to be nominated and petitions need to be filed, just like school board trustees, right? So there's the ed law reference to that as well. And then to continue with the steps. So the school district will actually have to, for the very first election, they have to place and schedule and place the legal notice and take care of the actual election, because technically it's their first one. And then the library board conducts a very rigorous public education campaign. Once the resolution passes and the vote passes, the trustees will then take office and apply for a charter. And once that charter is granted with New York State, the old library will then dissolve, and all of the assets, the financial assets and everything will get transferred to the new library. Because what is really happening here is that a new library is being formed, right? So then the school district will collect the taxes, collect all the money that gets approved by the voters, right? And then the funding remains stable because all that money is permanent until the library board places a new proposition and goes out for an increase before the voters. And the new vote can actually be held at the library. So are there any questions on that? So this is a lot more steps involved in that. There's more moving pieces, because you're actually going to be like dissolving the old library. You're forming a new taxing district, a school district. So so there's some legal things that have to happen. But it can be done. Usually the process takes about a year and a half, a lot more campaigning involved. I think that's probably what takes the most time, but the concept is the same. You're still going out on like the school's ballot, school's proposition. So it is a good option for libraries. So, speaking of the advantages, libraries they operate independently. They're not legally connected to the school district. Elected trustees provide that representation, right, for the taxpayers. You have that potential to increase the tax base and expand your programs, opportunity to bond for capital projects as that legal district. Once established, After that first vote, your second vote, if you need to go out for an increase, the library sets the time and place for the election. That stable funding. You may eliminate double taxation or that double dipping that we talked about. And then it's a simple process for seeking an increase in funding. It's just going out again on the ballot for an increase. So the considerations, once you form that district, you may have to assume functions currently provided by the municipality. You're no longer associated with your town, or your village. So they might say, okay, we're not going to snowplow for you anymore, or we're not paying your light bills. So you are going to be taking care of that. Your minimum standards for public libraries may be higher if your service area population increases. And these are all things that we work out with the libraries when they decide to do this. So these aren't things that are just sprung on you. So these are all considerations that we really talk through before this happens. So, and then trustees are subject to election. That's always a concern for some people. And it requires strong advocacy and education campaign. And then the library is subject to civil service and municipal purchasing laws. Any questions? Anything, Matt, that you want to add? I know I've just been talking and.
No, that's great. This is all,
Okay.
this is all perfect.
So I want to talk about the timelines a little bit. I mentioned it briefly with the school district option, but the school ballot, and these are just kind of roughed out, and they're just general, and it really depends on the school district that you're working with. So for the plain, the school ballot, just going out on your local school district's referendum. Right now, the fall is when your library really needs to decide what you're doing. And you got to make that decision and actually vote. If you're a first timer, you got to vote on your amount and contact your school district to find out when the deadline is to get that petition to the school board. So you can be included in their public notice, and make your well, if you're not a first time, to vote and do your override resolution. And then the winter spring is when you meet with your stakeholders, do your meetings and conduct your campaigns. And then in May, the third Tuesday, and that never changes. It's always the third Tuesday in May, is when the vote is held. And we actually have a school ballot toolkit posted on our website, and that is the link to it. And we have a timeline and all of the ballot related activities associated with the timeline is included in that. So that's a great reference. Municipal ballot, same thing. Right now is when you guys really should be deciding what you're doing. You have a little bit more time. January and May is when you should be planning and meeting, campaigning. And then July and August is when municipal board presents petition. If Board of Education, that shouldn't be there, but election day is when the vote is actually held. And there are some timelines that the municipality has as well. I know that they have to work with like real property to get, the tax amounts, figured out to be printed on the bills with the county and things like that. So it's really important to reach out to them as well, to get deadlines and everything established with them. So any questions with timelines before I jump into tax cap?
I have one. And you,
Sure.
okay, this is Ann Henderson. I don't know what happened to you. So the tax cap is coming up that we have to do.
Mhm,
And if we decide we want to increase our amount,
mhm.
when do we have to have the petition by? Or are you going to tell us soon?
Soon. So the tax cap is the bane of my existence because it makes absolutely no sense. And they did not, when they enacted the property tax cap report, they did not keep in mind libraries. So yeah, because the tax cap reports, they want the libraries that are operating on a calendar year, they really want them filed in November or when your budgets are due. And you don't submit budgets to anybody. You know, so it's very, these are more designed for local governments, right? Where like towns have to submit their budgets to the counties and so forth. So what I advise libraries, and I will be doing tax cap open labs. I do them every year. In the last couple of years, I've been doing them online to walk people through. And I actually have a recording, like a little canned webinar type thing that's also posted that people can use or view that help people. I've help libraries do their tax cap report. They just want you to fill out a tax cap report so they know what you're going to be, what your local levy increase is going to be for the upcoming year. A lot of times a library doesn't know what that's going to be in November. So I tell libraries, if you're going out for an increase, then yes, if your board has voted, if you're going out for 5,000, fill out you're going out for 5,000. You can and then submit it. But you can always go back and change like your tax cap report. But you can also, when you're doing next year's tax cap report, it's going to ask you, this is what you reported for last year that you went out for this year. What did you really go out for this year? So you have an opportunity to correct it or fill out what you really went out for. So it doesn't really make a difference, right? If you knew what you were going out for. Does that make sense? So I tell people, don't stress about the tax cap report because
Sure.
it doesn't matter. Like if you don't know, because a lot of people don't know what they're going to be going out for, what their levy limit is, or what they're going to be levying in November. Because a lot of libraries don't meet in November or December. They don't know until January sometimes, when their boards can finalize their budget in January at their annual meeting. So it's difficult and it's problematic for libraries. So that's why I say it's the bane of my existence, because it doesn't make sense for libraries. But yeah, so that's how I advise that. So I tell libraries, don't really stress, but some libraries, if they know they're not going out for an increase, they can easily fill out the tax cap report. So I don't know if that helps or answers your question.
What I was wondering was, okay, say we're going to increase it 3,000. When
Yep.
do we have to have the petition?
The
signed?
petition.
Yeah.
Are you going out on the school ballot or are you going out on the municipal? Because you do both.
We're on the school ballot for
Yep.
say 20,000. We decide this year that we're going to do 23. So I do the tax cap for 23, but I have to have a petition for 25 with 25 signatures, right?
Yes.
So when does that have to be in?
So that's, you would need to know, that's up to your school.
I see.
So your school legally, I'm just looking, so the vote is, I know I talked to Matt about this. Matt, when is the vote? Next year? Is it May 17th, May?
Yeah, it's, yes, it's May 16th.
It's May 16th. So school boards or school districts have to have their public notice in, like, to the public 45 days prior to May 16th.
Okay,
And they've got other requirements within that legal requirement, right? So what is that, April, whatever?
so I just have to have it by then.
Well, what I would do is contact the school and say,
Okay.
hey, we're going out on the school ballot. When do you need to have our information?
Okay,
And
so the petition doesn't have anything to do with the tax cap report. I think that's what I'm saying to you. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
But no, this is a really good question because school districts, they're all a little different. They will have their own deadlines of when they want that petition or that letter. Most of our school districts are going to be like, we don't want the petition, we don't care. Some school districts will say, we need a petition. So that's why we advise all libraries have a petition just in case. And if a school district is, say, using BOCES to print 4,000 newsletters, 40-page newsletters about their budget as their public notice, they're going to need 30 days to print that or whatever. They're going to impose some crazy deadline. We need your thing by February 1st. The library is going to need to know that to get that petition and that referendum wording to the school district by then, so it can be included in their public notice. So
Okay.
it's really important to contact that school district to get that deadline. So. we're
Okay,
fortunate-
thank you.
You're welcome. We're fortunate that we do have libraries in Henderson. I mean, you go out on the ballot every couple years. I mean, you go out consistently enough where I think your district is pretty familiar with the process. But we have libraries that go out every year that actually contact the library and say, hey, what amount are you going out for? Like, they don't even want anything just because they're so familiar, which is really nice. But then there are some districts that are a little more difficult to work with. So we do really advise, get in touch with that school district right away. Okay, so tax cap. So for those that are really not familiar with the tax cap, with some exceptions, the state's property tax cap limits the amount local governments in most school districts can increase property taxes to the lower of 2% or the rate of inflation. So what does this mean for libraries? So libraries that receive funds from a direct levy, which means a ballot vote, they are subject to the local tax cap. That means that you have to comply with that. So what does that really mean? It means that your board has to pass a resolution if you're going out for an increase that exceeds the tax cap. And that resolution doesn't need to be filed. It doesn't need to be filed or submitted anywhere. It just needs to be put with your board minutes. So once you pass the resolution, the override resolution, that's what we call it, it just needs to be filed with your board minutes. In case the state controller asks for a copy of that, and they might. So it's really important that the library board does that. So libraries have to file the state's real property tax report each year, regardless of seeking an increase or not. And that's if you're on the ballot. So libraries that are not on the ballot at all, if you've never gone on the school ballot, you don't have to do that, or the municipal ballot. Or if you're not a school district library, you don't have to do it. But once you receive or are on the ballot, if you receive funding from a direct levy or a tax base, you have to file the tax cap report. The very first year that you go out on the ballot, you don't have to do it. But when the second year, you do have to do it. So sometimes it takes the tax or the state controller a little while to catch on to the fact that the library has imposed a direct levy. But they'll figure it out, and they will contact the library usually through email, maybe through phone. They might follow up with a letter, but it's usually through email. And then you actually have to like log into their reporting system and then just file the report online. And it takes like 5 minutes. And it's just something that you have to do every year.
Paulette, there's a couple questions in the chat.
Yes.
One of them is, where do we find the link to file the tax cap report?
Okay. Do you have a link? Yes. So we do have, there is a link on our, it should be on our, I believe our trustee guide or our director's guide. I think they're one and the same. They mimic each other. And there is a tax cap link, but it's actually on the state controller's website. And we can send that out. I can send that out. Or Matt, do you want to throw that in the chat maybe? Or I can.
Yes, yep. And so I think there's another question in the chat too, that maybe there needs to be a distinction between the resolution and the tax cap report.
Yes. So the resolution is a simple form. It's just an override resolution stating that the library is going out for an increase and they are overriding the tax cap. And it is a form that we send out like upon request, like if you are going out for an increase that you know is over that 2%, which it usually is. Some libraries that have large amounts, like if your amount that you're on the ballot for is quite a bit, some libraries do stay within that 2%. But if not, then you do have to override that. You do have to fill out that resolution. We send that. So it's just an actual Word document that we send. And it's just a form document that just gets filed in your minutes. The actual tax cap form is a report that is online that gets submitted through the state controller. Does that help clarify? Great. Any other questions? And like I said, that, go ahead.
I was just going to mention too, Paulette, you had mentioned that the comptroller's office is the one that ends up contacting the library about needing that tax cap report. And so from what I've seen, and Paulette, correct me if I'm wrong, typically it comes as an email, and then the link to that portal is right in that email as well.
Yep.
Especially for libraries going in the ballot for the first time, eventually you'll just get that email, and then boom, it'll be the link right to the thing, just saying that you have to file a very simple report that Paulette has a lot of experience with and can help anybody with.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because it's a very simple report that, you forget about, and that's what makes it difficult. And it's one of those things where the password expires every year. So that's what gives people the most trouble with filling out the report is just accessing the report. But every November, I do set up some help, some work sessions. And I do plan on putting a couple days in the calendar that I will help people remotely. I'll just do them through Zoom sessions. And I will be setting those up. Usually like they're the second week, right before Thanksgiving, I'll set up a couple days where people can just kind of Zoom in, and I'll talk more about it and kind of walk people through filling out the report. So, so be on the lookout for those. So yeah. All right, so common to all ballot issues. And this is something we talk about in, trustee basics, trustee orientation. Trustees must speak with all, with one voice, all trustees. You got to put personal opinions aside, despite how you feel about funding in the library. Have a consistent message, designate a spokesperson. Usually it's the board president. Sometimes it can be the treasurer, somebody that knows the financial issues really well. And then be a unified front for the library. It's really important. And then it's really vital to have prepared answers to those difficult questions. And then making sure your staff have those answers prepared for them as well. And we all know those questions, well, why can't the library run with volunteers? Is this an additional tax? Why are you raising my taxes? The library has an endowment. Why can't you spend that down first? Why can't you get more grant funds? Can't the town, city, village just give you more money? Yeah, why can't they? Will this tax increase automatically? And then I don't use the library. Why should I pay for it? We've all seen these questions. And then the library seems fine. Why do you need more money? And again, having these answers, that's why you have that educational campaign for that. But again, as I mentioned, making sure your frontline staff, the people that your patrons are seeing every day, that are dealing with every day, making sure they have those prepared responses so they know what to say when they are, when they are confronted with these questions. So any questions before I turn it over to Matt for his portion? I know I threw a lot at you. And as Matt had mentioned, every library, their situation is different in terms of like their relationship with their municipality, and reasons for going on the ballot. So if you had a question or, wanted to talk through a situation, we are here to help with that. So just let us know. And with that, I will turn it over to Matt. Matt, you want to switch screen sharing?
Sure. Yep.
Yes.
Awesome. Let's see. Great. Let me go full screen here. All right. So Paulette went through the process. And now we're going to talk about choosing an amount. How do you determine what amount you go out for on your school or municipal ballot, right? So we're going to look at funding history and forecasting, your opportunity to grow, your current municipal funding, and the timeline. Okay, so choosing an amount. So your funding history. Have you tracked your past funding at all? Have you done an actual chart that shows what your funding's been for the last 5, 10, 15 years? Try plotting it out on a chart, and I can absolutely help you with this. Again, I'm a sicko. I love the data. It makes me so happy. Just ask me and I'll do it for you. This can help staff and trustees make informed decisions about your budget moving forward when you reveal that past history, right? Even this last year, I've done several of these charts and shown libraries, hey, you've had the same municipal funding for the last 10 years, 15 years. Time to go out on the ballot, time to increase, right? Okay, so let's look at an example of that. So this is all 65 libraries in our 4-county area, right? It's a stacked area map, which means you've got a total funding up here. Total funding is increasing. School district, we only have one special legislative district library, Norwood, only gets a very small amount, 89,000. But school district funding in green here, look how little it was of the total. Now look how big it is. And that's just from 2011 to 2021. Okay, so overall funding has gone up because of the school ballot. Total funding has increased 37% because of the school ballot. But our libraries overall, you can see that yellow village funding has gone down. Town funding is basically flat, which with inflation means it's basically gone down. And county in blue has basically been flat. And if you're a St. Lawrence County library, your county funding was removed in 2012. So there's zero county funding there, unfortunately, right? But this data, when you do it for your own library and you see how much your municipality's been contributing, can be very revealing about, oh no, we need to really increase our total funding. Okay, here's another way to display the same information, but a different perspective on it. So this is showing the total percent each funding stream makes, right? So that's all 100% all the way, but school ballot funding was only 42% in 2011. Now it's 60%. That means that for our libraries, if they're, or for you, you know, if your village or your town or your county decided to take away all the funding, at least you'd still have 60% of your funding left. Now, that's a very extreme scenario, but it highlights the thought of green school district money is never going to go down. But your village, town, county, city, it's all at the mercy of those, you know, municipal board members, right?
Yeah.
If they decide to cut the library, and that's absolutely happened. I know that it's an intimate situation with some of the people on this call too. If your city says, hey, we just want to cut the library, it's, you know, puts you in a difficult scenario. So some funding history questions. What percent of your total funding, kind of what we were just talking about, is sustainable, like ballot funding, municipal funding, and school ballot funding? It's never going to go down. Or volatile. Volatile meaning it's at the mercy of those municipal board members. Could you survive if your city, town, or county funding disappeared, if they decided to cut it? Even if you've been utilizing the school ballot, do you feel like your budget is healthy? Are you able to keep up with, oh God, inflation right now and rising costs? I mean, New York State minimum wage increasing over these past years has already been enough. Has already been tough enough for many of our libraries. Now inflation is really putting our libraries in a difficult scenario. Do you have reserve funds for an emergency or capital project? A lot of our libraries go on the school ballot to build up those reserves for anticipating a crazy, you know, expensive capital project. You know, I'll talk a little bit more about this, but of course, our old buildings have so many surprises. Okay, so the budget forecast, looking ahead. We've looked at the history of things. Now let's look to the future. What will your budget and operating expenses look like next year, in 3 years, in 5 years? And are your costs rising? If you're a human being living on planet Earth, yes, your costs are rising. What is the potential for cuts from your current funding sources? Is your municipality struggling or are they thriving? I'm going to guess that most libraries with municipal funding right now are not having cash being thrown at them. Does your budget support the goals and objectives in your current long-range plan? So of course, you know, we've got to talk about maintaining a certain level of services. What about, your ambitions and your goals. Do you have the money to meet those goals? Again, I'm a big data nerd, so it is sometimes helpful to plot operating expenses on a chart broken out if needed, right? So salaries for employees, your electrical, your internet, things like that. And if you can see it rising a little bit over the years, then it can at least give you some idea of what those costs might be in the years to come and how to prepare. Again, we want to be proactive, right? To anticipate those issues, those budgetary issues, and not reactive. We don't want something in our building to break down and then not have the money for it. We want something in the building, if it were to break down, to then just be like, great, this is why we've been saving up those reserves. Aging buildings are expensive to maintain. Municipalities and communities are struggling. Local leadership changes. Suddenly a town supervisor or city manager or somebody comes in that just doesn't like the library. And it can really change the narrative for how the library is funded. Reserve funds are not long-term solutions to balancing a budget. Create a funding plan that's proactive, setting the library up to withstand potential issues. Okay. Also, again, we talked a lot about anticipating, emergencies and keeping up with just maintaining our operating costs. But what about the opportunity to grow? What does your long-range plan say? Where are you going? Are you considering expanding services, hiring additional staff, building improvements or upgrades, and technology? And growth is something to highlight in the education for why you're pursuing ballot funding. I'll talk much more about your advocacy messaging around going on the ballot, but if you're able to say to the community, we're buying all new computers, our computers are all at least 4 to 5 years old, and we're getting a 3D printer, we're going to be open extra hours in response to maybe the community wanting more night hours, things like that. Hiring additional staff. I mean, a lot of the times it's just a security safety concern if you've only got one person in the building at all times. Just like, in retail environments, there's a lot more safety when there's 2 staff people working. Okay. Again, we talked a little bit about this already, so I'll be quick, but your current municipal funding, it's so important that if you currently receive municipal funding, to have a discussion with your current funding sources. Again, that can be a couple sources for some libraries. For many of them, it can be your village, your town, your county, and create a plan with them. When both parties plan together, this can be a win-win. The municipality is struggling. All municipalities are struggling right now. And you're the one thing that if they're still funding you, you have this alternate, this excellent alternate funding mechanism, right? So the municipality can save funding, save money funding the library less after the library has been successful on the school ballot. That's why it's so important to make a plan with your municipality and say, look, if you can just fund us the same amount over X amount of years, we'll get our increases on the school ballot and then eventually replace the municipal funding. The library receives sustainable funding that cannot be decreased by the municipality, right? And the municipality may consider lowering taxes for its residents. That's why you plan with your municipality oftentimes. If you're hopefully have a good relationship with them, and I understand, of course, that relationship can sometimes be a little bit difficult. Also, don't just look 1 year out. You really want to look several years out and create a multi-year plan. So since ballot funding is reliably stable, unlike other funding, many libraries choose to transition their entirety of their volatile funding to their ballot, even in one vote, which is more risky, or multiple votes, which is less risky, right? Do you go out for $60,000, or do you go out for $20,000 over 3 years? And, of course, you want to look at your own finances and see if you're even able to wait that long to do that. But of course, it's a very big balance here of choosing an amount and having a plan and assessing your risk. And I'll talk a little bit more about risk in just a second. Okay, of course, too, you want to consider a plan that considers a budget vote that doesn't pass. We got a 96% success rate in the North Country Library System, and we have a lot of really awesome tools and advice to help you really have a successful campaign. You know, I look at Ogdensburg as being an excellent example. I know there's a couple trustees here from Ogdensburg. Hi, Mark. But absolutely, Ogdensburg went out for a couple big amounts, and they were put in a really difficult situation with their city. They ended up losing one year and then going back out and winning. And so they withstood, you know, all of that budget issue and everything. And they did actually lose one year and then went back out for a huge amount and won. I mean, and that is an awesome success story in our area. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit more about risk assessment. Ballot history, again, looking at the history of actual ballots, how many people voted, etc. Common issues and responding to issues. So the ballot history. Approval ratings are so important. This is like one of the most important guiding factors for how you plan for your advocacy going out on the ballot. What was the percentage that your vote passed or failed if you've been out before? If you haven't, we can still look at approval ratings for your school in the past. How many people voted each time? This can be important to scale your campaign around. How do the results differ from your vote compared to the school's vote? If you have multiple years worth of data, do you see any trends? Oh, wow, more numbers, of course. So on the left-hand side, we've got library vote results from 2022, and NCLS also has 21 and 2020 easily accessible. We could probably dig up some earlier data for you as well. But here are library vote results on the left-hand side for school ballot in May, right? And then the school's own budget results on the right. So you can see here, again, you can strategize with this. Did the voters approve something similar to the school's ballot, right? Or was it much less? Some libraries, their approval rating was much less than the schools. That should tell you something. That should tell you that you've really got to work on your, you know, foster a little bit more positive relationship with the community, right, to turn out those voters. Another thing that's important about looking at these results, and again, even if you didn't go last year or if you didn't go for 5 years, find how many people voted at your school's vote, right? So, you know, a lot of these are in the hundreds. And if you create a plan, let's say you create a contact list that's got a few hundred people on it, and they're all library supporters and they're all, you know, library users. Yeah, you could really, you know, comes time to vote and you really let all few hundred of those people know, you could really almost guarantee a successful vote for the library. But it just takes a little bit of that legwork, right? So again, ballot results are very important, and especially Paulette and I can help you get those. So we want to look at, you know, I've boiled the local environment down into 4 categories. How does the community, and again, we're assessing risk, we're planning. How does the community feel about the library? Positive or negative sentiment towards the library and taxes in general? Can you do a focus group or survey so that you can really get tangible public opinion and then create an advocacy strategy or plan off of that opinion? Of course, for libraries funded by the municipality, how do they feel about library ballot funding? Have you made your plan with them? For libraries seeking school ballot funding, how does the school staff feel about the library? Or as Paulette had pointed out, the superintendent is a very critical person to have on board with your ballot plans. Do you have their support? What is the perception of the school budget vote in general? Does the school have a contentious vote coming up? Are they suddenly going for a large amount? Okay. And then the fourth one is just overall political and economic climate of the community. Have there been any recent major changes, perhaps to businesses or employment or to inflation, right? We know that everybody's struggling for sure. And that's something that to keep in mind. And it doesn't even necessarily, it's something to keep in mind when you're choosing your amount, but certainly you can still choose whatever amount that you're going for and really mold your messaging around the empathy that you understand what the community is going through. And that the library is also in a difficult situation too because of that economic climate. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a few common issues, and some libraries will have this and some won't. And many libraries, it's true that they don't have to deal with some of these difficult conversations, but it's always good to be prepared because suddenly we've seen it time and time again, even in our own area and across the state, there's just like one person who just has an axe to grind with the library and they suddenly come out and then are putting the library in a very difficult situation. So I'll go over some of these common issues, but a new tax is the first one. For libraries pursuing ballot funding for the first time or transitioning to a school district public library, there are often residents in the new tax base that are being directly taxed for the first time for the library. Additionally, residents in the current tax base will see a new tax on their school bill. How many residents will be taxed for the first time? And what specific areas or communities will be taxed for the first time? So that way you can say, you know, the school district might be the majority of your town, but maybe there's a sliver of another township that's suddenly being taxed for the first time because they're within that school district that's being, you know, taxed for the first time. So how will you address the residents in the current tax base? And I'll cover a little bit of strategies with dealing with these difficult questions. But again, these are very real questions. All of these are very real situations. And again, have your message prepared to answer these questions and consider resident and non-resident cardholders in that message. So oftentimes for any library that's going on the school ballot, but maybe it's only chartered to serve something smaller, that would be the vast majority of our libraries. You want to remember that even though you're chartered to serve those resident cardholders, we all know that you're serving many residents outside of your chartered to serve area, right? So going on the school ballot, that bigger tax base is more indicative of your actual usage. Okay. Representation. Libraries who have residency restrictions for trustees, so mostly municipal libraries, school district municipal libraries, some association libraries do optionally have residency requirements in their bylaws. Oh, thanks, Tim, and we'll send you the recording. Yep. So many of those, so I was just referring to a question in the chat or a message in the chat. So yes, libraries that have residency restrictions. If you're a municipal library, you have a residency restriction, period. It's your chartered to serve area. If you're an association library, then chances are you don't have a residency restriction, but some association libraries do have, they've chosen to have a residency restriction in their bylaws. Check your bylaws. So there may be residents being taxed, right? They cannot serve on the library's board because they don't meet the residency criteria. Be aware of potential backlash and residents affected. We do have a situation of this locally where a library was faced with some expensive legal challenges, and it's that they serve their city and they've decided to go on the school ballot, right? So trustees can only come from the city, but there are now people outside of the city being taxed. And one of those people who can't serve as a trustee because they don't live in the city, but is within the school district and is being taxed, decided to legally challenge the library, and it did lead to some expensive litigation. And one thing to note is for libraries in that situation in particular, where it's a school ballot, they want to tax the school district, but they only serve a smaller portion, changing your service area to becoming a school district public library changes your actual boundaries. to the school district. So trustees can come from the entire school district. That solves the residency requirement. Now, some of our libraries, there are sometimes multiple libraries within the same school district. That is a great, what do I want to call this? Shout out to the district class that Paulette and I are teaching for the first time. Paulette, if you wouldn't mind putting a link to that class in the chat. But we are doing a district class next month that'll highlight a lot of those district specific issues and about forming a district. Okay, so representation. Okay, the next common issue is double dipping. Libraries sometimes collect funds from multiple sources in municipalities. Some residents may be paying multiple taxes, such as a municipal and school district that support the library. It's important to be aware of these issues existing in your area and how many people are affected by it. Overlap. Sometimes an area, and again, I can't stress this enough, if you have any questions that maybe your library does or doesn't deal with some of these issues, Paulette and I are happy to help you with that and identify those very specific issues and areas and populations and things. So sometimes an area being taxed may include some residents who are already being taxed for another public library. Often it's an unavoidable the way the school district or town lines are drawn. We have several examples of this in our area. You know, I think of our Indian River School District libraries or our South Jeff School District libraries. In Indian River, you have Evans Mills, Philadelphia, Antwerp, and Theresa, 4 libraries in the same district. So when one of them, you know, Theresa goes on the school ballot, Evans Mills residents are getting taxed, right? But that's okay because New York State has given us this very legal mechanism to find more funding, to secure more funding for libraries. And again, it's not the most elegant solution by any means, but it's something that we do have to be prepared to address when a citizen, you know, when a voter brings this up to us. Okay, so all of those issues are real issues. They are real issues. A new tax, a lack of representation, you know, not being able to be a trustee, overlapping and double dipping. There's no perfect answer, but you do have to be prepared to address those concerns. So research. So first off, you really want to know what the specific issues are. Research the potential. Of course, again, Paulette and I are happy to help identify the specific issues in your community. Know the boundaries and the communities affected. Be empathetic and understand where those people are coming from, because it is a real issue. Highlight that the success of the library depends on sustainable funding, and the library serves a larger community. Acknowledge that while sometimes not an elegant solution, this is the funding mechanism provided by New York State, the very legal, already been challenged, you know, mechanism that, again, you're under New York State education law. You're under the education department, just like schools, right? And it's that New York State ed law that provides these methods of securing additional funding. Okay, and again, not the most elegant solution, but libraries are often asking for much less than their school or more, right? Ballot funding may ease financial stress on the local municipality. Think of the WIFM principle, right? The WIFM, what's in it for me? By you going on the ballot, even with this maybe not elegant solution, what's in it for the municipality? What's in it for the taxpayers of that municipality? How can those taxpayers benefit? Oh, they don't use the library? Well, they benefit indirectly, right? Because their neighbors might use the library. And when you're helping, when a library is oftentimes one of the only organizations in the area helping those more vulnerable populations, bringing the bottom up, everybody in the community wins, right? So it's important to help handle those, to help create those messages, right? So that staff and trustees can really be prepared to answer these more sensitive issues. And again, you can't change everyone's mind. That's not necessarily the goal, right? We all know from politics over the last several years that we've got some yeses, some nos, and some people on the fence in between. And you don't really have to spend all of your time addressing all the nos, but you do have to be prepared to handle that conversation with them with grace, right? And then spend the other time driving out those yes voters and then working on those voters that are on the fence. You know, they might just not know that you exist, which is a great segue into the last part, advocacy basics. So we've talked a little bit about the risks, and that is certainly a really good, the acknowledging and knowing the risks and being prepared for those questions are something to really keep, to really influence your message, right? So here are the advocacy basics: the messaging, servicing, and the 5 E's of advocacy. Okay, the message, the core message. Craft a message that trustees, friends, and you know, if you might not have an official friends group, but certainly you've probably got some really strong volunteers that are much like a friends group. And so having them help you carry your library message, your library advocacy into the community is so important. And you know, staff, trustees, friends are all going to work together to promote the same message. Just like Paula had pointed out, everybody's got to be on the same page. The message may include specifics about funding, general information about library services, value and performance, and how it reflects your mission and plan of service. Additionally, consider each audience and what resonates with them. What are you telling your community leaders about your pursuit of funding? Why should the community support the library? And what is the value your library brings to the community? Anybody who's attended any sort of advocacy class with NCLS before, you know how much emphasis we put on identifying all the different audiences, right? Your municipality, maybe local legislators, maybe local business owners, maybe other local organizations. You've got a Rotary, you got a Chamber of Commerce, you got a Lions Club, whatever it might be. And then crafting a message to them that will resonate specifically with them. Local legislator might be all about employment and entrepreneurship, right? So you really want to craft a message, and this is just good advocacy basics, you know, vote aside. This is just good advocacy basics all year round, right? Being able to say to your local legislator, oh yeah, did you know that the library, anybody with a library card has access to Job Now, which helps our patrons create amazing looking resumes. Okay. Educational advocacy. So you've probably are a little familiar with this concept before, but basically advocacy about voter initiatives is different than everyday library advocacy. There are limits to what staff, trustees, and friends can say when it comes specifically to a vote. For staff and trustees, you can educate about the vote. You can say voting, the additional funding will go towards extra hours and more staff and more programs and more books. That's all true. That's all fact. That's educational. But you can't say vote yes, because when you're being influential about this vote or this legislation, then it's considered lobbying. And as a nonprofit, you're not supposed to do that. If you do have a dedicated friends group, your friends can do that. That's like those political messages we see on TV, right? Paid for by the friends of so-and-so. Okay. There's a link in here. When you receive the email with the recording, and it might be tomorrow, usually the recording takes a little time to process, but when you receive the email with the recording, you'll also receive these slides, and you can click on the links in these slides. So for instance, we've got a nice advocacy do and don'ts, and this is from the American Library Association, ALA, and it breaks it all down. So we got what trustees can say and do, friends, and the library staff, right? Super super helpful there. Okay. As far as crafting your message, it is so important. I can't express how important enough it is to use community feedback. Instead of asking yourself, what would resonate with the community? Just ask the community, what resonates with you? So use community feedback to develop your message. This feedback is good at identifying any concerns about the library or a new tax that you can address in your message. You can gather feedback formally in a poll, a survey, a focus group. Additionally, you can look online at local news, social media, and more to identify topics for your message, local topics. What are people saying? And is it worth addressing broadly, right? Again, Paula and I have seen so many different, whether it's local advocacy examples within our own system or across the state or across the country for that matter. We have at this point years and years of seeing a lot of messages and what does work and doesn't work. But absolutely, I think that having a focus group, poll, survey, and then going from there to help craft your message is super important. Okay. You also want to be accurate and transparent. If you're not transparent about ballot-related information and dollar amounts, the community may look negatively on this. In some situations, the opposition is more likely to spread inaccurate information in the absence of accurate information. I've seen firsthand where library chooses not to post an FAQ or anything on the website. Library director gets a call. I heard this is going to be $80 increase. And the library director says, no, it's going to be $8, not $80. Can you imagine how angry that local taxpayer would be? And they didn't even have the truth. So that's why it's so important to be accurate and transparent. And again, Paula and I can help you figure out any costs, anything related to the messaging in that way. Okay. Surfacing. This is so important. It is October 25th. You have several months to do any more surfacing before your actual vote in May. This is the concept of building community support for your library before you have to ask for support. It's the difference of asking a stranger for $20 and asking somebody that you've known for a long time for $20, right? The person that you have known for a really long time, you've already built up enough goodwill with them. And they're more likely to give you that $20 than some stranger, right? So voters are more likely to support your ballot initiative if they already have a long understanding about the library's value and role in the community. And imagine those community members who have heard nothing from the library until they're being asked to vote. So that's why surfacing is so important. Building up all that goodwill and reaching out to all those organizations and partnering with those organizations too. If you can have a firefighter come in and read at story time, you know what I mean? Having those partnerships in your community with those bigger groups, and they all have people in their families and friends and stuff. And when they hear that you've been partnering and all the great things that you do for the community, that maybe somebody doesn't use the library, but with all the story times and summer reading and that focus on early literacy that you do, they indirectly benefit because the education level of the community, the literacy level of the community is being brought up, right? Okay. We're almost done. This is great because we're right at the hour and a half. And the last concept I'm going to talk about, and I think this is genius. Paulette and I saw this concept 4 years ago at a conference. It's the 5 E's of libraries. Again, it's something that ALA, the American Library Association, has. And it's the idea that libraries basically, all their services are boiled down into these 5 areas: education, employment, entrepreneurship, empowerment, and engagement, right? So we all know it's education, it's lifelong learning, it's adults learning things, coming to programs, coming to different lectures and stuff at the library. It's the books, it's the nonfiction books, it's the databases that you offer. And then we look even younger, right? It's the, like I was just saying, the summer reading, the early literacy, the story time, championing reading and literacy for the youth, right? So you do education, you do employment. People come to the library all the time to fill out job applications, to look for jobs. Everybody has phones, but they don't necessarily have a computer to craft a resume. You have Job Now, a wonderful database where people can, that helps with the employment, right? Entrepreneurship, helping small businesses. We have a wonderful database for those small businesses called Reference Solutions, right? And it's right, that's right on our ncls.org homepage, Reference Solutions. Also partner with your small businesses, bring awareness to them. Your local artists, they're small businesses too, in a way, right? Okay, empowerment. You're giving people the knowledge, you're giving people the tools, right? You're empowering them so that they can improve the quality of their life, ultimately, right? And engagement. We all know this. People come into the libraries all the time just to be able to engage with each other. And often, I mean, 99% of the time, that programming is free. It's totally free that you do. And what else in the community right now is free? What is your library doing in each one of these topics? Consider your audience again, which identify the audience. That could be the Rotary, it could be a local legislator, and then think what E's are important to them, and then craft that message. Okay. All right. Woo, we did it. Here are Paula and my emails. And at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, before we get into any questions, if there are questions, I am going to stop the recording. So here we go.